Yeah, so today we'll be discussing issues of interviews. Yeah, so I think what you need to appreciate is that whenever there is a vacancy, the job is advertised, and after the advert, the job, maybe the people who have applied, they are shortlisted, and after shortlisting, the people now have to be called for an interview. So what you need to understand is that the human resources department could be key in this process. So what you need to also appreciate is that an interview, I think in short, is an interaction between an applicant and a panel or an interview panel, or sometimes it will just be one person, or maybe some people, two, three people, or five, six, depending on the nature of the organization and also maybe the magnitude of the position, to say maybe how big is the position. And because we don't have any law that guides how interviews have to be done in terms of the number of panelists who have to be there, and also so each and every organization would use their terms and conditions service or the recruitment policy or interview policy to guide on how they have to carry out the interview process. So you might find that in the interview panel could be two people, three people, four, five people, six people. Yeah, but we always say it's important to have um, a number that is not even an odd number. For example, three, five, seven. Yeah, it's important because sometimes you might need to decide through a vote on certain decisions, and so it's always important to have an odd number. And also, I think what you need to appreciate is that whenever the panel has been set, it's always important to be informed of the candidates who are coming for the interviews so that maybe they can declare if they have got any interest with one of the candidates. Would it be positive or negative? We have seen some cases whereby some interviewees, the candidates could say that maybe Mr. So was not supposed to be on this panel because I'm not in good terms with this particular person and all that. So it might affect the whole interview process. But what we need to appreciate is also because at the end of the day, you need to have a concern. If there are some concerns, I don't think you can say the interviews have been done in a professional way. Yeah, so it's always important to have a panel that is not biased and also that is not conflicted. And also, what we need to appreciate is that there are certain things that maybe whenever you are doing the shortlisting, I think it's always important to ensure that the candidates who have been shortlisted, they are meeting the minimum requirements. So the HR department might need to validate if all the candidates are meeting the requirements, rather than some of the requirements have to be noted in the interview room by the interview panel, which in this case might not be the same team that was involved in the shortlisting, because it's always important that sometimes the people that were involved in the shortlisting were also are not involved in the interviews. So you might find that maybe there is some kind of information. For example, someone the position required someone with a master's degree, but maybe the one shortlisted has no master's degree. So it always becomes a problem for the interviewers to interview such kind of, or even how to score such kind of a candidate who was not supposed to be in the interview room in the first place. And also, I think what you need to appreciate is that there is always need for the candidates to be invited to the interview through a formal letter, or sometimes you can call them through a phone, but also maybe writing them is also is very, very important. Maybe you can send it by email. Yeah, and also there are certain cases where people have been invited to an interview through a newspaper advert. I think that's not good practice, because sometimes you might find some employers might be harsh on their employees for sake of that. Maybe they were seen in an advert in the newspaper to say had applied for a job somewhere and they're going for an interview, and even it becomes a bit of a trick whereby then the candidate has to what kind of reason I can state to say is more you're not available on the particular day, because people know that he's going for that particular interview. So it's always important to think also that some candidates might be employed somewhere. And I think whenever the advert, I mean the interview invitation letter is being sent, it's better to detail some kind of information regarding where the interviews are going to be, like the physical map, or even the venue of the interview, the date and time, also even transport arrangements, in terms of whether the organization is going to provide transport, even to state whether the interviews will need some kind of presentation and all that, and also whether the interviews will be done virtually, or maybe it will be a physical interview, like maybe in terms of the virtual could be on Zoom, Google Meet, or maybe Skype and other means. So it's always important to ensure that. And also it's always important that the employers, whenever they are using a virtual platform, should be able to check with the candidates if they are comfortable to be interviewed using maybe that kind of particular a visual platform, whether they for the need for them also to prepare, and also maybe have maybe can be shared a link of that particular platform. And also so it is always important also to ask the candidates, maybe through that kind of a letter, to bring their copies, or the original certificates, because they're going to be needed during the interviews. And this is where you validate to say if the candidates, what they had put in their CV is also in line with what they have on the ground. So they have to show the panels, and also to confirm. So the panels have to confirm. And also in some cases, thinking you can also be able to inform the candidates whether you need to do, before they do the formal interviews, you might do an aptitude test or a psychometric test. All that information should be provided, whether there will be the need for psychometric testing. And also sometimes the jobs, for example, when you have advertised, or when you're inviting people to the interviews, sometimes you can attach the job description of that particular position, so that for reference by the candidates. And also I think in some cases, one of the candidates could give an apology. I think once an apology has been given on time, you can be able to remove that particular person and be able to reach out to another person who was maybe on the waiting list. Because sometimes when you have a shortlisted, you might have a waiting list, in case some of the candidate would say maybe it's not comfortable to come, or not manage to come. You can be able to reach out to those people who were on the waiting list. So it's always important. Even in some cases where you don't want to do a group interview, the candidates could be informed of the same. So in short, these are some of the things that we need to be considered during the interviews. And also sometimes candidates, they can dress differently, but it's always important for candidates to dress appropriately, decent, formal. Of course we know there are certain jobs which don't require formal dressing, but it's always important that, because you say first impression last, sometimes you find that it's always not bad for you to just to put on a decent shirt and maybe a necktie on one day. This is a good day for you as a candidate to show that you are very interested in the job. And also what is important also to appreciate is that some panelists can score negatively against a candidate because of how one has dressed. And even sometimes people would argue in terms of maybe having dreadlocks and all that. Some people might have a negative attitude towards that. It's always important to be able to look smart, and also to have such kind of not to be considered as if you are not interested in the job, but you should be seen that you are very, very interested in the job, and you shouldn't allow some kind of bias from any of the people. So, but also interviews could be challenging. Sometimes there are certain jobs which maybe when you just focus on the oral interview alone, you will not be able to get the best candidate, because some are blessed when it comes to talking, but maybe they are not good when it comes to the actual job. So for some jobs, you may need to have also the practical aspect of the interviews. And when you have also the interview questions, it's always important that the interviews questions should be formed within the interview room, not like forming them a day before, or the people have to bring the questions into the interview room, because they might share with the candidates, because they might know some of the candidates, so they can be able to share with second of candidates. So it's always important to develop the interviews within the interview room based on the job description or the nature of the organization and or even the sector that you are in. So it's always important to develop the interviews within the interview room. So what is also important is to have an interview score sheet, which maybe you'll be scoring and the number of questions that you're going to ask. And there are certain things which maybe might not be relevant to score on, for example, issues of dressing and all that. Yeah, but it all depends on the nature of the organization. But I think if the focus should be on the interview questions which are there. So it's always important also to ensure that people are being asked questions, and also the interview scores is really focusing on the interview questions. So each and every panel could score independently, or the candidates, and maybe their scores could be added, and at the end of the day, each panelist score for each candidate could be aggregated and also averaged. So it's always important to do that. So these are some of the things that you need to do during the interviews. What is important is just to ensure that you're having the best candidate for the job. So it's always important that you should be as professional as possible, and the HR department at the end of it will write an interview report which is going to give even the weaknesses and also maybe the strength of each candidate, depending on what the interview panelist had indicated. And maybe this kind of report could be sent to the director of the organization or the CEO of the organization for approval. And if the director has got some reservations, has no powers to remove any of the candidates and maybe consider one of the candidates as a successful because he was not part and parcel of the interview. So what he can do is just to refer back the report to the interview panel to maybe reconsider their position, or in some cases could just recommend or direct that the interview should be redone, rather than removing one candidate who was maybe successful and replacing him now with the second best person. And also what is important after that has been done, it's important to check to go for references. References you can go to for the employer reference, but also you can also go for the referees. So the referees are different from the employer reference. The referees could be people whom this person has worked as supervisors and all that, even the principal of the school that they were or the vice chancellors and all that. But for the employer reference, you write to the maybe CEO of the organization, and the CEO may ask the one who was working with that particular person in that particular department and to write a reference on behalf of the organization. So it's always important. And also some employers would go beyond looking at the references of the employees by searching their information on social media, what they post on Facebook, Twitter, and all that. I'm not sure whether that one could be a basis for you to not to give a job to someone, or to give a job to someone, because some employees, what they do on social media is different from what they do at work. So it's always whenever you want to use that approach, to do it with caution. And also but what is important is for you to not to be biased on things which might not be relevant to the job. And also you might need to authenticate, for example, the certificates. You can authenticate with the Ministry of the universities where they studied, and also the schools that they were studying and all that, even the National Examination Board, or even IGCIS, and also other professional bodies, if that person is really bona fide owner of that particular certificate. And also you might also need to check information whether the such kind of degrees, for example, degrees are they accredited or not. So locally you can check with the National Council for Education to check if the certificates or the qualification that one has they are accredited. This is whether the qualifications are from Malawi or from other countries. what is important is to check whether they are validated. And also once you can also do what we call the police checks to say whether the person has no any criminal record. You can also do professional body checks. Some professional bodies might have barred some of the people who had applied for the job. For example, lawyers, they have got the Malaysian Law Society, may have to check whether they're in good terms with them. You can also do the medical checkups, which are also very, very important. But this medical checkup, we're not doing it for the sake of discriminating this person in case maybe is positive to a certain disease, but you're just doing it. Maybe how can we support that particular person? And also you can do salary negotiations with this person, provided the salary negotiations are not done in a way where we're going to be moved by the what that particular person is getting wherever he is working, because sometimes it can affect your budget, and also at the same time you can lead to you can disadvantage other employees who are in the organization, maybe offering a higher salary to a new employee, whereas there are others who have been serving the organization for some time, but maybe they are getting a lower salary. And at the end of the day, when you have done that, you can also be able to offer that particular person. So the offer letter would have included information, all the information that has to maybe the wages you are going to pay that particular person, maybe you need to pay airtime, whether it be pension, whether it will be the medical schemes, and also whether there will be gratuity, the amount of annual leave, and also whether there will be transport, any other condition which you feel, whether how long will be the probation, the working hours, and even where that person will be working, and also maybe a detailed comprehensive terms and conditions service you can be able to share with that kind of employee to ensure that maybe he's able to read on his own. And also sometimes you can also be able to have a platform whereby you can receive complaints regarding the interviews, and also and once the employee has joined, you can be able to also check with the loans board to say whether they have any issues with that in terms of the loans, and also you can be able to check that, because it's a requirement under the law in the under section 30 subsection 1 to say employer has to comply with the loans board in terms of repaying the loans after deducting from the employees. So if employers who are not doing that, they can be convicted and to be able to pay a fine of 1 million kwacha. And also I think the last process under this process is to inform those people who are not successful, but this can only be done after the interviews, after the successful candidate has reported for duty. So we might need to inform the candidates who are not successful of this particular. We need to say maybe the position is now filled, because sometimes you don't have to communicate to these people. Maybe before the person has reported, it can happen that maybe the person who wanted to report but has decided not to report, then you might find yourself in an awkward position where you have told someone that he was not successful. And also just avoid saying that maybe they were not successful, but maybe a better way of putting it is just to say the position has been filled. We thank you for showing interest to work with us. We are looking forward to a future whereby you can also be considered for other jobs that might be able to be there in future. So what is important is to ensure that you are managing the process in a professional way, because it happens that sometimes you might find that the person maybe after 2 months has resigned or was successful, and sometimes you are not during the interviews. You will just communicate to the candidates to say, maybe we don't communicate anything to candidates who are not successful, but we just, whenever you don't hear from us, maybe in 2 months' time, you just know that you are not successful. So that kind of information is also very, very, very important. So because sometimes you can reach out to the people in the future if you have seen that maybe the one who was successful has rejected the offer, or maybe after reporting has resigned within a month. So just want to thank you for this session that you are to listen to, attend to, because this one in terms of interviews, how best can we do the interviews, and there is always a challenge because we don't have a law, as I said earlier on, to say how should we handle interviews. So thanks so much for listening. Thank you.